To be honest, if I had to choose one city out of this entire trip that I would love to go back to and even live in someday, it would be... Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Pablo and today I want to talk to you guys about my road trip through the north of Spain. So as some of you all know, I am an American currently living in Spain. I am centered in Madrid at the moment. However, it is summertime now, and as soon as August rolls around, everyone in Spain and in the majority of Europe is on vacation. Most people leave the city and go to small towns or places in the outskirts of the country near the ocean or near the river, the mountains, anywhere that they can just relax and enjoy the full month. And while I'm here, I am also taking off August and just enjoying the sights around me and exploring the continent a little more. Me and some friends are currently in a month-long road trip through the north of Spain and the south of France. We just finished going through the north of Spain and I filmed a lot of the most memorable moments and a lot of the cities and towns that we were at, and I want to share all of that with you guys. So there are 17 regions in Spain, regions kind of like states in the United States. Each region has its own distinct history and identity. Everyone is very proud of where they come from, and a lot of these regions have their own accent. So you can begin, after being here for a few months, you can begin to identify what part of the country people are from. Some regions also have their own dialect and their own language. So apart from speaking the regular Spanish, or Castellano as they would call it here, there's a lot of different languages like Gallego or Catalan that are very prevalent in the regions that they come from. But out of the 17 regions, I visited 4 of them in my trip this August. So we started off this trip in the northwesternmost point of the country called Galicia. Then we went eastward and went straight to Asturias, then Cantabria, and then we finished off in País Vasco, which borders France. So now that you have a little idea of what I'm going to be showing you, enjoy the rest of the video. So we started our trip in the northwesternmost point of the country in a region called Galicia. Now Galicia has a very rich history. They have a lot of history with tribes and even their own monarchy at some point centuries ago. However, the weather was a lot worse than we expected it when we began the trip. Galicia is a very rainy region and they've been having a particularly cold and rainy summer, so we didn't stay there for long and we went directly to the next portion, which is Asturias. We found a campsite that was very close to the ocean that we loved, and we made our way over there. We decided to start our trip camping because we wanted to connect a little more with nature. After being in the city for so many months, you get overly saturated with everything that's going on and just noise in general. What we didn't expect was going to be happening is that the weather was horrible. It was rainy for the first 2 to 3 days of the trip. It was very difficult being in a tent when the weather was so rainy. So it was definitely a challenge. It was very much a rocky start to this trip. However, even though the weather was not ideal, we enjoyed some very beautiful sights. We found several beaches that we really enjoyed and some cliffs that offered breathtaking views of the Atlantic. So something interesting about the north of Spain is that in the north, the majority of places that touch the ocean are very rocky. So it's very common to, at the edge of the ocean, have just like a cliff that just goes way down and in the bottom is the ocean. On this second day, we found this edge of a cliff with a small beach next to it with some amazing waves. Asturias is known for its surfing, so there's a lot of people that go in the summertime and find the best waves that they can. So we found several places where surfers were just camping out, waiting for the mornings. The wind and the rain was intense, however the sights were incredible. While in Asturias, we found that the typical drink of choice for a lot of people is sidra, which is kind of like an apple cider vinegary drink that has alcohol in it, and it's super cheap. I think the bottle costs like somewhere between like 3 and 5 euros, which is nothing really. Something very typical is that whenever you pour it, you try to get a long distance from the place that you're pouring to the glass so that it can catch a little air. We also started to realize that the food in the north was incredible. We were enjoying some amazing dishes and we knew that it was only going to get better from there, from all of the things that I've heard from other people. So after a couple days of camping, we made our way to Gijón, which is another area in Asturias. We were planning to spend the day there, however, it was very crowded. It was the first sunny day after like a full week of rain, so everyone was taking advantage of the weather. So we just drove past it. Here's some footage of that, but the city itself was beautiful. Our next stop was a small town called Lastres, and we did some free camping there, or acampada libre, which means that you just find a place to set your tent and you sleep there. So we weren't at a campsite, we kind of were just out in nature. But we found this amazing place. It was honestly one of the best waking up experiences that I've ever had, because I was right in front of the ocean and it was so peaceful. We woke up for sunrise. I loved every second of it. Some of these beach areas were so movie-like and even borderline spiritual. I had some very incredible moments just reflecting and taking it all in. And road tripping through it all is awesome as well, because you get to see a lot of the small details of a country that you don't see in the big cities. So you could see a lot of houses and farms and animals and little hidden pathways that there's really no chance that you would see otherwise, unless you're just road tripping and kind of finding your way through and exploring a little bit. In Asturias, and it's very, very windy. On to the next region, we went to Cantabria. Now Cantabria is another small region eastward of Asturias. There were so many beach towns in Cantabria. A lot of people go there in the summer, so there's a lot of like condo-like buildings next to the beach that are very nice and appealing. So we spent a couple days there before we went on to the next region. Hey guys, so we were just driving around trying to get to our next destination, a small town in País Vasco, so in the northern part of Spain, close to France almost. And we were just driving around and didn't really have any expectations, didn't know where we were. We parked the car, we get out just to stretch. I walk out like 2 minutes away from the car and I stumble upon this. Like... only in Spain, honestly. This is just an incredible church. So now, saving the best and the most dense for last, we went to País Vasco. Now, País Vasco is an incredible region. It's definitely one of those regions that stands out from the rest. I think it also helped that at this point of the trip, the weather was really nice. We started getting a lot more sun, so we were a lot more optimistic with how everything was shaping up. So we were in a very good headspace when we got here, and País Vasco delivered. The País Vasco is very well off. It's one of those areas of the country that you can tell has a lot of money, a lot of industry, a lot of factories, a lot of cities that are very international. It's a very cool place to see. I highly recommend the País Vasco to anyone that's looking to experience Spain in all of its levels. So a little history about País Vasco is that, like a lot of other places in Spain, it's had independence movements. Now, what does that mean? If you're not familiar with Spanish history or political movements at all, there are some regions in the country that at some point in the past or still have fought for their independence from the overall country of Spain. A lot of these regions have very strong cultural identities and their own history, and they don't necessarily feel like they belong in the overall picture of Spain. So El País Vasco is one of these places that has had a dense history with independence movements that date back to even just a couple years ago. Overall, the region handles itself in a very different way than the rest of the country. They have a very strong economy. You can tell it when you're driving past. People are a lot more wealthy than the rest of the country. And they're home to some very internationally recognized cities and places, which I'm going to be showing you today. So our first stop in País Vasco was Bilbao. I had visited Bilbao about 5 years ago when I was 19. It has a very iconic museum and building designed by Frank Gehry, which is the Guggenheim Museum. Now they have about 3 floors and maybe around 8 galleries, a video room, a room with like the classics or the masterpieces. They have a lot of exhibition spaces with a general theme that they've curated themselves. And overall, it's a very beautiful space. Some of the artists that I got to see included Andy Warhol, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Mark Rothko, and a lot of local Spanish artists as well. Now the city is very modern. It was the first city in my trip, and maybe in my time here in Spain, where I felt like it reminded me a lot of an American city. And I say that in the best way possible because the architecture, the general modern feel of like a well-developed American city Bilbao had. Now I was very excited to see an exhibit by Richard Serra. He's an artist that creates these spaces with metal blocks that are very curvy and have sometimes even ovals, and you just walk around and get lost in these spaces. It's a very magical and even spiritual feeling. It kind of makes the hairs on your arms stand up a little because the place is so big and these steel slabs are ginormous. It's definitely a very interesting experience walking through it all and feeling how small you are and just flowing through the spaces. So then we hit the road again, and this time we went to San Sebastian. To be honest, if I had to choose one city out of this entire trip that I would love to go back to and even live in someday, it would be San Sebastian. Holy cow, this is an amazing place. I recommend everyone go see it at some point. It is such a beautiful balance of things. You have incredible gastronomy. It's very common to go get pinchos, which are basically like little bites or snacks, and you go to a bar and you select all the pinchos that you want. They put them on a plate for you. Each one typically costs anywhere from 2 to 5 euros, usually somewhere in between that, like around 3 euros for a pincho. And you just sip on your favorite drink, either some wine or a beer typically, and you eat your pinchos, and oh my god, they're freaking amazing. My mouth was so happy. While we were there, we spoke to a local who compared it a lot to Monaco. And even though I've never been to Monaco, I've only seen it in movies and pictures, it definitely has that feel to it. Money, money, money. There are so many places and streets and neighborhoods in San Sebastian that are, you can just tell, are loaded. You can see the money everywhere, which makes for some incredible houses. Now, one of my favorite memories in San Sebastian was when I was walking through this pier that went straight into the ocean. Now the city is a little curved. When I was walking through this, I could see a lot of the city and the ocean in the end. On the left, I could see a hill with incredible homes. I could see all of the buildings of the city and their own little beach. They have a little island off the coast as well. And then on my right side, there were all of these restaurants next to the pier serving authentic seafood from the region. It smelled incredible. Every plate looked delicious. Also very pricey because they know the value that they have. But overall, the city is just truly incredible. It's a beautiful mix of like old authentic European architecture with the modern parts of the world today. One of the first days that we were at the beach, we saw at the edge of the city all of these lights and these like attractions that I was like so drawn to. It seemed like a state fair. Right off the bat, I knew I had to go at some point, so I started asking around when it was open, what it was, and sure enough, it was a fair. And we made our way over there on one of the nights. It reminded me a lot of a fair from my childhood. When I lived in Mexico, I lived right in front of a church and a park. And every year we would have a fair, or a feria, which was the same concept. And we had all of these attractions, like that ship that goes like this. I don't know what it's called, but I loved riding that as a kid. And all of these games where you like throw hoops on bottles or throw darts at balloons. And we had that same experience in San Sebastian. So even though we didn't spend a lot of time there, it was really cool to see. And that little ship thing that I mentioned, it was right next to the ocean. I really wanted to get on. I probably should have gotten on. There's a lot of aquatic sports. Everyone is so athletic in the north. So even though I think the weather is a little bit cold in the winter, in the summertime it's a perfect place to vacation, and I'm definitely going to be going back soon. And now, after finishing off our days in San Sebastian, we made our way to our final destination in Spain, and that is Hondarribia. Hondarribia is not a very well-known place in Spain, however it should be, because it's a very beautiful and quaint little town city-ish. It's a mix of both. It's only like 30 minutes away from San Sebastian, so it's very close to that big city. We stayed at this camping site that was called El Faro. El Faro is like a lighthouse, and we stayed at this camp that literally had like levels. Like, have you ever seen a rice fields and how it has like levels off of a cliff? It was like that, but with tents. I got to just wake up in front of the ocean and go to sleep hearing the ocean, and it was such a peaceful moment. I think in terms of mental clarity and peace, it's probably the place that I've experienced that the most. While I was at El Faro, I got very suntanned. I spent so much time in the sun reading and swimming, so I definitely got a little darker, which happens every summer. It was about time to do it, I guess. It was really just the true definition of a vacation. After 3 days that we spent there, I was ready for something different. However, those 3 days were magical, and I wouldn't change them for the world. Now, Hondarribia was very cool to see because it is a border town. Now that means that it's literally touching France. So there's a town called Hondarribia in Spain, and then there's a town in France right next to it. It was super interesting to me because I grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is also a border town. However, it's a border town between Mexico and the United States, and as we know, there is a border wall and very strict regulation between the two. And whenever I saw these towns and how they managed each other, it was a little eye-opening. I knew that most of the world was like this and not like the US and Mexico. However, it was very incredible to see that these two towns literally just had open borders and people are just moving around. So like whenever we were at restaurants, we would see a lot of French people there. And a lot of the Spanish people vacationed in France a couple weeks, or definitely at least a couple times in their lifetime. So very open in terms of sharing their cultures and traveling from one place to the next. So the main street is super authentic and rustic, and there you can tell that the buildings are like so old, but they're so well preserved and they're colorful and people have flowers. And at the edge of the street there's all of these restaurants that most of them serve pinchos, and the town was popping so much that there were literally lines in every single restaurant, so you had to choose which line you wanted to stand on for like an hour before you even sat down. But it was all worth it. The food again was just incredible, and I had a very pleasant end to my time in El País Vasco and Spain in general. So if you're still here right now, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I loved filming this and sharing it with you guys, so I hope it inspires you to seek out these adventures and maybe go to one of these places if you ever consider traveling to Spain or the north of Spain. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below and consider subscribing to my channel. There's a lot more videos to come. See you all next time.
They say never try to hide yourself, but I spent all of my money